Welcome. I am Mary Margaret King, National Board Certified Teacher and Maintenance of Certification Mentor. Today, I would like to give you just a brief overview of the Maintenance of Certification process, just in case you are interested in maintaining your certificate, or maybe it's almost time for you to renew. So let me share my screen. All right, so are you ready for your maintenance of certification? Let me just go ahead and tell you that if you are a National Board Certified Teacher and you are debating whether you should maintain your certificates, then the answer is definitely yes, 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 because I know how hard you have worked to achieve National Board status, and you need to continue with that distinction. And we'll get into that just a little bit more. So first, these are some of the things that I want to cover today. This is just a very brief introduction. And then if you have more questions, I'll give you some contact information at the end. So let's talk about why MOC. Let's look at the eligibility and the important documents. And then what is the difference between the initial and MOC? A lot of people have questions about that. Then I would like to just give a brief overview on the two components, talk about submission, and then give you some additional supports. So why MOC? Like I said before, I know that you worked very hard to obtain your national boards. And so really MOC is just a way to continue with that distinction, and then also continuing highlighting all the things that you have done over the past 5 years. It's also a great reflection tool to keep looking at all of the things that you are doing to ensure that your students are getting the best learning experience possible. And then also there's this monetary stipend, right? As teachers, we always, many of us are looking for ways to supplement our income so we can continue with the stipend. And one of the things we'll talk about later is why 5 years now rather than 10. So a lot of state licensure requirements are updated every 5 years. So this is really was revamped to align with state licensure requirements. And also just as a National Board Certified Teacher, you're in that leadership role. I always say that teacher leaders empower other teacher leaders. So you will have a lot of leadership opportunities when you have this distinction. So are you eligible? Can you go ahead and maintain? So if you are a National Board Certified Teacher and your certificate is still valid, your state license is still valid, then you are eligible. So you are going to want to go to your My Profile in your National Board's account. Go ahead and update that. If you were like me, when I came up for, it was renewal at the time, I had to go back and remember my login information. So I would go ahead, that's something you can do now before this process, go back into that account, update it, make sure you can log in, look at the registration, the dates, the payment information, and some of the submission requirements. The calendar, you have a couple of opportunities to renew, and this is the calendar. I also wrote it here. So you can either start 2 years before your certificate expires, or you can wait. This is sometimes people use this as their second opportunity. You can go ahead and start the year before. I suggest if you're able to go ahead and start 2 years before. That kind of gives you a cushion. So you can't really begin filming until September before. So you can either the September 2 years before your certificate expires or 1 year before. So where do I begin? National Boards has a very extensive and wonderful website for you. I always tell my candidates to go there. I would print off all of the material that is under the MOC tab and create a notebook. And I will tell you, I'm a virtual person. I like paperless, but for this, I also like to go ahead and print and use my highlighter just to really work through all of the directions. So that's where I would begin. Go ahead, print all of the things, look through those requirements, and look through the overview, highlight, write down your questions that you may have, And then you can contact some of the supports to help answer those, or you can contact national boards. How do you register? So this is on the website, but there's the window. You can look at those guidelines. There's a fee, a one-time fee. It is non-refundable, $75. There's withdrawal dates, just some important dates that you can go through. These are on the website. Now, one of my big questions is, what's the difference in my initial certification versus the maintenance of certification? And let me tell you, as a teacher who's been through these processes, the maintenance of certification is half the work, maybe less than half of that amount of work, because you had 4 components. Now you only have 2 components. And now it's much more of a holistic evaluation where you have to just show sufficient evidence. Okay, so it has to, you're either going to maintain or not maintain. There's no assessment center. And one of the parts that a lot of teachers love, the cost is a lot cheaper. So $495, then you have your one-time registration fee. And I will tell you, MOC was revamped last year, and it was made a lot of changes by teachers, for teachers. And what I tell my candidates is MOC is very doable because teachers understand how busy teachers are, and we are going through this process during a school year. So it was created with that in mind. So let me tell you, if you are hesitant, it is very doable to get this done. Like I said before, you're not really recertifying, you are just keeping your certificate active. And so it's just, national boards, you're measuring how are you continuing to grow as a professional? How are you growing in the classroom? How are you impacting your students? How are you growing with other professionals? So what you are doing is you are just proving that you are maintaining. You've already proven that you are this national board certified teacher. Now you just have to show that you are continuing that growth. So I think that the MOC is just a natural way to reflect on what you are already doing in your profession. I think that's why it's so important to maintain. Now, remember the 5 core propositions. So don't forget that your evidence is really based on you proving the 5 core propositions. And then we are also going to look at the architecture of accomplished teaching. So really, if you look at these 5 things and you think about it holistically, you have already done this and you continue to do this in your profession. You're committed to your students and your learning. You just have to show that within your components. Are you committed to your students? Do you know the subjects? You are the expert in your classroom, the expert in your content area. So you do have to, sometimes I will have teachers who have left the classroom. So you would have to borrow a classroom and you have to teach in the original content area in which you certified. But let me tell you, let me assure you, I have teachers who do that all the time. And like I said, it is very doable. You are responsible for managing and monitoring that student learning. That's what you do, right? Assessments, and you're constantly monitoring and giving feedback. You think systematically about your practice. This is where, and you reflect on what you are doing. You're members of learning communities. So think inside of your classroom, but also outside of your classroom professionally. And then the architecture of accomplished teaching, it really just goes hand in hand with those 5 core propositions. So as you are writing your written commentaries, you're showing you know your students, right? You know who they are. You know what your students need better than anyone. You are setting goals in your classroom based on those students' needs, and you are meeting those needs. You are providing equity and fairness to those students. You are showing your goals. You're highlighting that, and they're appropriate for this group of students. And then we all know, if you've been through the national boards process, that reflection component is always very important. So you're going to reflect on student learning. What are you doing well? What will you change next time that you teach this? So that reflection component. Now, I have had people who have asked me, let me go back, sorry. Okay, so I don't know, is it worth it? So let me tell you, I really like these numbers. The cost, $570 is what you're paying to maintain. Right now, is it achievable? 98% of national boards succeeded on renewal. Now, like I said, the MOC is a new process, but national boards anticipates similar rates to that. And y'all, the time factor is so doable. Like I said, I would say it's half the time or maybe not even that. On average, 40 to 60 hours to complete these two components. Now, at a glance, component 1 and component 2, you only have 2 components. There's no assessment center. So the first component, the written commentary, you only have a total of 8 pages written, 8 pages. And then you have to present your evidence. Remember, evidence from when you first certified, you have to have 4 samples of evidence. And this time, remember that you are just having to provide sufficient evidence to show that you have done these things that you have written. So you will have 2 PGEs, and I'll explain these just a little bit more, but you'll have 2 PGEs, professional growth experiences, that you will write about in component 1. Then in component 2, you will take one of those PGEs from component 1, and you will base your lesson in your classroom, and you will video. So you can have a 10-minute video, and then you will have 5 pages of written commentary. So those are your 2 components. Component 1 is written only. Component 2 is your video and your written commentary. Now, this is where if you are not in the same content area or you've moved out of the classroom, maybe into administration or a different role, you would have to borrow a classroom for component 2. So let's look at component 1. You have 4 pages of written commentary per PGE. This time you actually have a template where you will write your commentary and you will copy and paste it into this template that National Boards has given you for submission. 2 samples of product. Well, you can have 2 pages of samples of products. It could be 2 or you can condense. So 2 samples of products, which is 12 pages. Remember, PGE is just your professional growth and experience where you are showing that you are continuing to grow, you are continuing to have influence in the classroom or beyond the classroom. And then your samples of products will just be the documents, the evidence that you use to prove that you actually completed these PGEs. And I'll give you some examples of those. So what are PGEs? I always feel like this is the most difficult part in the beginning, because really for teachers, you actually have just a wealth of PGEs, things that you have done, milestones. So it's kind of hard sometimes just to wrap your brain around those, to brainstorm and really determine the 2 that you will want to use. And that's where I really think that it's great to have a mentor who can guide you in that. So what are some things that you've done, your professional growth experiences that have had a direct or indirect? So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that benefits just your students, but also other students. So are you a leader in the school? You help teach other educators who teach in their classrooms. So in a way, you are indirectly impacting student learning. So some examples could be obtaining a grant, organizing family activities. These are almost more milestones to me. PGEs, when I mentor, I think of like holistically. So what are some things that you have done as far as like your education and training? What are some things that you have done in your content area? So what are some things, some professional growth experiences, content area? What are some things that you have done to grow? Have you attended workshops, trainings? Have you sought out things on your own? So how have you grown? It could be in community, in your alliances with community, with stakeholders. What have you done with collaboration with other educators? So you have a wealth, like I said, of of professional growth experiences. And like I said, just in the beginning, doing that work to narrow it down and choose the 2 main ones that you'll focus on sometimes takes just a little bit of extra work. Samples of products will be, like I said, the samples of products just has to be something sufficient. So if you did attend a training, you could use, if you have a certificate from that training, if you have an email, or if you're going to talk about how it affected students, you could even use data. I've had teachers who use things like Mastery Connect data, AR data. So there really is a lot of examples of things that you can use to prove that you have completed these PGEs. Written commentary. The written commentary for component 1, you have to answer these 5 questions. And I always tell my candidates, let's use the language, make sure that we've answered all of these. I like to, what I call write to rubrics, and I do a lot of that with mentoring. So you're going to provide the context. And like I said, I would print these out in a notebook. I would go through and highlight. So you can think about these things when you are narrowing your PGEs. In fact, if you're interested in mentoring, I like to have a chart where we look at the PGEs and we actually write it according to the rubric in the brainstorming phase to make sure that that is the one that would give you sufficient evidence for this. So you're going to provide the context. You're going to look at the PGE. Think of PGE as there was a need, and this is how I met the need. Then you're going to look at how did you acquire and deepen your certificate area specific content or your pedagogical knowledge in this PGE. Then we're going to look at how did this PGE positively impact student learning? And like I said, it can be directly or indirectly. And then that reflection component, right? So you're going to reflect on what are some changes? What are some next steps, right? Because as teachers, we always want to be growing in our profession. Then you will answer these 4 questions for 1 or both of your PGEs. You're only required to answer for 1, but you can answer this for both if you choose. So how have you integrated technology into your practice? Yeah, we are in an evolving technological world. So I always tell my candidates, anytime you use technology, write that in your commentary. National Boards wants to see how you are using technology. How are you using fairness and ensuring fairness and equity, promoting diversity among the students? And I think that last year with COVID, we did have a lot of access to technology. And I think that this really helped with the fairness and equity component in some of the schools. Then explain how your interaction with colleagues and other professional groups or community members has enhanced your professional growth. Because remember, we always also want to show how are you growing just outside of the classroom. Then analyze the patterns or themes that have emerged that define you as an educator. So I always think this is really my favorite component of national boards, that once you go through this process and then really toward the end, as you really reflect, how are you growing? What areas are emerging as an educator? What's important to you? Is it that you are a lifelong learner and you're going to continue to grow? Or what are some of these patterns? Now, component 2. This is when you will actually record you in action in your classroom. So you have the written commentary. It's no more than 5 pages. And I always tell my candidates, like, once you video, you've done the work, then you go back and you watch that video and you write it up. And I always feel like I had to watch my video several times, and then you really see how you are an effective teacher. So your video can be no more than 10 minutes, no more than 3 segments. I encourage my candidates to use the 3 segments because I like for them to show really a progression of a lesson. So you have to design the lesson in your original content area. This is very important. Like I said, if you are no longer in the classroom or you've even changed, I've had some who go to middle school when they certified in elementary, so they have to borrow a classroom. You cannot record any earlier than September 1st, so remember that. You will have a form you have to fill out to attest to that. You can segment it into 3 parts. You have to show your students together. And these are things that, like I said, if you print off this material, you highlight it, your students have to be with you in at least one segment. Now, there are some COVID guidelines if for some reason we are virtual, which I get into that more with mentoring, or you can look on the National Board's website. So you have to show your students interacting with one another and then also reacting to what you are doing. I tell my candidates start filming several times, then go through your videos to select. So you also have a rubric for this, and these are questions that you will answer. Now remember that you have to choose one of your PGEs. So if you had a professional growth experience in education and training, and you went to a workshop on a writing strategy, well, then you would use that PGE in your lesson. Or if you wanted to use your professional growth experience of technology, then you could actually design a lesson in your content area using technology. So it doesn't necessarily have to be content area PGE. You just have to be teaching your content area in the classroom. And sometimes that's a little confusing to wrap your brain around. But like I said, with those, when you reach out for supports to help you determine those things. You also have to show, what are your goals? How do they fit into the broader context? Why is this instruction important for this group of students that you have at this time? That's important that you explain that. How are you showing fairness and equity in your classroom? How does it reflect your certificate specific content knowledge? You also have to show that. Then explain the impact of your teaching on student learning. This is where you cite examples from the video. When you look at what your students are doing, you come back and reflect and you think, oh, his answer could be from something that you taught them earlier in the year. This shows me he listened when I taught this. Now he is indicating that he learned that. So you're going to show those specific examples. Then that reflection component, once again, how are you going to change anything that impacts student learning? How are you going to change anything that reveals your professional growth? The format is a little bit different from the initial certification, and you can look through that. These are things that before you get ready to submit, you really just need to go through this, make sure that you have met all the requirements. But now it's 11-point Arial font. You can double space, use one side of the paper. We know that. Make sure that also it's going to give you formats like Word, Office, PDF. So pay particular attention to those. Remember that we still want to preserve the anonymity of people. So your students, principals, your state, your school name, you want to make sure that you don't have any of those. You do take those out. Now, it is an electronic submission. There's no packing up a box anymore. So everything will be submitted electronically. When you get ready for that, you really need to go through that, talk to your mentor, make sure that you do follow the guidelines. Now, where do I go from here if you're interested? And like I said before, if the question is, do I want to maintain? Then yes, you do. I'm telling you, it is worth it. It is doable. You need to maintain. So you can go to your profile and the National Board account. You can go ahead and register and pay your fees. Download and print those materials. Print them all out, make a binder, start reading through that. Write down questions, concerns that you have. Begin brainstorming those PGEs. I think that's probably one of the most difficult parts, is just to brainstorm everything. And then it almost seems a little overwhelming, but it's not. Because you will have, honestly, you'll have too much, and then we will have to condense it. Go ahead and get those student and release forms signed. You can find those on the site. And then if you want to contact a mentor, you can go to the Ole Miss website. There are several MOC mentors. It's $150 fee, but just check those out. And I just want to thank you for joining me today. Here is my contact information. If you would like to contact me, feel free to do that. I will, if you would like for me to be your mentor, or I can put you in contact with someone who is closer. But this time there will be in person and also online. So if you feel more comfortable participating virtually, you can do that as well. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you have learned more about the MOC process.